Welcome to part 3 of our series on boosting immunity through nutrition. And today we're going to be looking at something that we call primal pattern diet typing and your immune system. So let's get stuck into this straight away. Primal pattern diet typing is a concept that we learned at the Czech Institute in California when I studied there under Paul Nanjiček. There's 5 parts to it, and I'll explain this pretty quickly, and then I'll go in to explain why it's really important to get this right for your immune system. So what we're really looking at in primal pattern diet typing is your metabolic type. What is the most appropriate diet for you? And we're really looking at this from a macronutrient point of view and not a micronutrient point of view. So when we talk about macros, we're talking about, of course, fats and carbohydrates and protein. And the correct proportion of those for you and how we get it right. The second part of this is we look at the science behind fats and carbs and protein. We're very interested in what the scientific studies can prove. We're not interested in what the media says, what fad diets say, and what governments say, because a lot of that is not based on science. So we're not interested in that. We are interested in what we know of the facts. Third, we like to look at everything from an ancestral point of view. And we like to look at the work of the great anthropologist, Weston Price. I'll just show you. Here he is, Weston Price. So Weston Price, I mean, he traveled around the world in the 1930s. And he visited almost 500 tribes around the globe. And he went everywhere from Africa, the Americas, the Polynesian Islands, Australia. He went to remote villages in the Outer Hebrides and the Swiss Alps that were untouched by modern civilization. And what he found was that at the time, tuberculosis was really, really common and really rampant. For example, 1 in 6 people in France died from tuberculosis at that period in time, and it's very common, particularly amongst the urban poor. What he found, that was people that were eating an ancestral diet had very, very low or virtually no incidence of tuberculosis. But when they moved to sort of busy towns and cities and started switching their diets to sort of white flour, sugar, jams and vegetables and things like that, then their health deteriorated and their incidence rates of sort of viruses and bacteria skyrocketed. So that's very, very interesting and topical based on the spread of the coronavirus right now. So that's Weston Price. And then the 4th thing we look at is personalization. So this is very important. Like, some foods that may be very beneficial for some people may be very, very problematic for others. So we're talking about things like allergies and intolerances, which are different. Allergies are generally something you are born with. For example, I have a nut allergy to particular nuts, which I was born with, and certain nuts are very problematic to me, and I have an instant allergic reaction to those within a minute or so. And that is an IgE reaction. And intolerance is generally something you develop over time. And the amount of intolerances to foods you have are normally highly correlated with the leakiness of your gastrointestinal tract. So personalization, and of course, something that is missing from a lot of this work that is largely conducted by many people is common sense, a complete lack of common sense. So for example, if we look at these common ingredients and additives that you'll find in packaged foods, sodium aluminosilicate, butylated hydroxyanisole, and potassium metabisulfate. Now, I'll be honest with you, I have no idea what those 3 things are, and I'm struggling to pronounce them. My common sense radar is telling me I shouldn't really be consuming products which contain these ingredients if I can't pronounce them. So that's one example of common sense. So priming pattern diet typing is looking at these 5 things. So let's take a look at this as a live example. So here is a sample client, a John Doe client that we put together, and their prime pattern diet typing profile. So as you can see, we've broken this person down into 5 types, or we can break down anyone into these 5 types: a polar type, an equatorial type, or somewhere in between. And this particular person has fallen into what we call a variable type with an equatorial bias. So an equatorial type would be somebody who consumes more of a vegetable or vegetarian type diet, and they would do better on a diet like that. And a polar type on the other side would be someone to eat a more meat-based, maybe a more ketogenic or paleo type diet, and they would do better with that. And that is really respecting our genes and ancestry. Of course, humans are adaptable, and we can deviate, and I've certainly deviated along this scale throughout my time, but we tend to sort of congregate around a certain point. So based on the prime pattern diet type, we can look at, for example, this person is a variable equatorial bias. So, you know, a good starting point for them would be consuming about 10% of their calories from fat, 30% from protein, and 60% from carbohydrates. Then we have some rough guidelines down here. Of course, this is good starting points, and we need to test and measure and see how people feel. And then we have the other types down here, equatorial type and polar type. So what we see is that if people should be eating more like this, but they're eating more like this, then generally we have a big problem. And likewise, if people should be eating more like this, but they're eating more like this, and we also have problems. And so we're going to go into that and how that affects your immune system. Let's go back to our slide. Okay, so that's a summary of prime pattern diet typing. Now we're going to look into how this can affect your immune system, and this is everything that I want to discuss here. Excuse me, I just take a sip of tea. Okay, so the first thing is excess meat and fish. If you are a equatorial type or a carbohydrate type, that is more of your natural diet, and you're eating a lot of meat and fish, or you're eating more than you can actually tolerate or metabolically deal with, you're going to have undigested animal flesh or fish flesh hanging around in your gastrointestinal tract. And this is a big problem. We don't want undigested meat and undigested fish hanging around getting putrid in our gastrointestinal tract. Nature doesn't like this situation either, so nature introduces parasites or bacteria which will consume this undigested food in your GI tract. Of course, your immune system does not like these parasites and these bad bacteria in your gastrointestinal tract, and it's going to go after them. It's going to target them. And as we discussed previously, most of your immune system is in the lining of your gastrointestinal tract, and specifically to do this kind of thing, stop invaders coming into the body and attacking things which shouldn't be there, like parasites and bad bacteria. Of course, if your immune system is spending all day doing cleanup and mop up, it doesn't have much energy left over to fight things like the coronavirus. So eating right for your prime pattern diet typing is absolutely critical. And let's look at it from the flip side. Let's say your diet, and this is far more common, to be honest, because in the last 40 years we've had a rather fantastic experiment in the developed world about eating a very high carb and low fat based diet. And this problem is certainly what we see is more common, particularly as highly refined carbohydrates, a very, very cheap source of energy. So it helps feed the many, many people in the world. Unfortunately, it creates problems. So with an excess carbs in your diet that your pancreas and insulin cannot deal with, then we're going to invite fungal, mold, yeast, candida infections. They're all the same thing. They're all part of the fungi family, but I'm mentioning all four here because this is the most four commonly used terms when dealing with fungi. Consuming a lot of sugar, consume a lot of carbohydrates that turn into sugar, drinking a lot of alcohol, particularly things like beer, large quantities of beer. This is rife for feeding a fungal infection in your body. And of course, your immune system is now going to target and tag this stuff, which is going to mean there's less energy left over for your immune system to fight things like the coronavirus. Likewise, bacterial overgrowth also occur. Bad bacteria will proliferate with excess sugar in the diet. This is the main reason why teeth decay is formed. It's not sugar rotting your tooth. It's sugar encouraging the proliferation of bad bacteria in your mouth, which create an acidic environment, which then rots your teeth. And then again, excess sugar in the diet, it activates your central nervous system. It ramps up your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight nervous system. It encourages the adrenal glands to release cortisol. And one of the side effects of cortisol is downregulating your immune system. So that's a problem, another problem, an additional problem with excess carbohydrates in the diet compared to excess meat and fish. And then the last thing is micronutrient deficiency. So this is quite interesting. And again, this really affects more equatorial types, vegetarians and vegans. It is quite easy this day and age with commercial non-organic vegetables, highly refined carbohydrates, vegetable oils, to become very micronutrient deficient. It's much harder to eat a balanced diet on a largely plant-based diet than it is on a meat-based diet. There's a lot of vitamins and minerals that can be easily missed out. Plus, a lot of minerals and vitamins are not absorbed as well or as bioavailable on a plant-based diet. So it requires a lot more work. It can be done, but it's much harder. Here is a post that we wrote on that here. It's called, Does our diet affect our mental emotional health? And so we go into a little bit of the history here, vegetarian diet, gut-brain connection. And then what we've done is we've listed out a whole bunch of nutrient deficiencies here from sort of vitamins and minerals, and then the kind of problems that it helps us with, or the kind of problems it helps us manage. So here we've got vitamin A, helps us manage stress and produce feel-good chemicals that improve our concentration. Vitamin D, deficiency linked to depression, schizophrenia, and chronic mental health. And all these are actually mental conditions. All of these here are all sort of brain-based conditions. And then along here, what we've put is all the best places or sources of this. And as you can see, for going from cod liver oil, going from left to right, all the way to shellfish, these are all sort of meat and fat and animal-based products. And we can see these are, the lion's share of these resources are here. And then we have, towards the end, leafy green vegetables, beans, fruits, and vegetables. And a lot of these vitamins and minerals are really hard to find in leafy greens, vegetables, beans, or fruits. So if they are available, we need to eat a hell of a lot to get up to the recommended daily allowance. So this is really important to be aware of. Feel free to check this out and shoot me any questions you have on it. But basically, if you are eating a largely plant-based diet and you're feeling a lot of stress, anxiety, and happiness, a jumpy mind, just feeling you're not quite where you are and you've been eating this way for a while, then that's a very good indication that you're missing something critical from your diet. And of course, this leads to immune suppression. Something absolutely fascinating that I read yesterday is that our T cells, so these are specific immune cells which go out and kill bugs in our body. Our T cells, it's a cell with a cell membrane, and on the cell membrane has receptors, and receptors activate the cell to do certain things. 90% of the receptors on a T cell are endorphin receptors. Endorphins are happy brain chemicals. So what that means is the happier we are, the more we activate these endorphin receptors on the cell, and the more likely these cells are to go after nasties in the body. Absolutely fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And it certainly makes a lot of sense, because if we can look at incidents of depression and loneliness, your longevity outlook, goes right down. In fact, being lonely is increases your chance of mortality more than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So you're more likely to die early from being lonely than you are from smoking almost a pack of cigarettes a day. So it's very, very important. So that's the last point I'll mention on that slide. Okay, so eating right for your prime pattern diet typing, your metabolic needs, your genetic needs, it's absolutely critical. And that's the topic for today. Thank you very much. So part 4 we'll release in a couple of days. Maybe that'll come out on Sunday morning, and that's the bonus. And we're going to be looking at everything else aside from nutrition, because I can't do this topic justice without mentioning things like movement and breathing and hydration, emotional management, stress management, vitamin D exposure, and things like that. So that's great. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye.